where everything started, me fearing the body changes that I was going to possibly go through, that's when women gain their strength, or girls gain their strength. You get through that, you slow down a little bit, and you come out the other side even stronger.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 197 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. I am actually here to introduce you to my guest host for today. This is her third episode that she is recording. Sarah Crouch will be the one recording the episode today, and she did the interview with our guest, Kate Landau. You have been listening to these episodes with Sarah as the guest host, and she's been doing a wonderful job. And I'm really excited for her having the baby in a few months' time, which is just going to be wonderful for her as her life is changing so much. But for today, as I said, she is interviewing Kate Landau. Kate has really come up all of a sudden, even though she was a very like a phenom runner when she was younger and really had a promising career ahead of her. But an eating disorder took over and just kind of pulled her down, pulled her away, made her quit the sport. She quit the sport for a long time, as you're going to hear, and eventually just kind of stumbled back into it after having a child, and actually has done very well. As I said, 2:31 in the marathon. And you're going to hear about some of her other accomplishments. Kate has really kind of made an impressive wave in the running scene, and especially doing it as a masters runner. So I just want to give you a warning. If you are someone who is working through an eating disorder, this may be a slightly triggering episode for you. So maybe get someone else, a friend who you know, to listen to it first and just check that it is okay. But I do think this is a very inspiring story of kind of what can come out of the other side. And I often get people messaging me about if I gain weight or if I stop doing these behaviors, will I ever be able to run again? And I think Kate is a perfect example of, I'm not saying you're going to have to take 15 years or more off running, but you can come back, and it's never too late, essentially. So, and you never know what you could accomplish when you are fully fueled. I can definitely attest to that part. But I do want to let you know that, yes, this is a bit triggering potentially. If you are struggling with an eating disorder, I do have some links in the show notes of all the episodes that are related to eating disorder recovery and kind of getting your nutrition right. So I'd strongly recommend going to the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 197 to go listen to those to make sure that you are kind of on the right path to help yourself get some help. Now, I just want to take a moment to quickly thank our sponsor for this episode, Tracksmith, and then we will be right to the episode with Kate. Thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. I appreciate this brand so much. They put a lot of time and energy and effort, and they sweat the details so that we don't have to do that. We are just left with quality products that are durable, that last, that just feel... I can't describe it, but the material is so comfortable. I want to wear it all day long. And I love seeing when my friends are wearing Tracksmith clothes just in general day-to-day life because of that exact reason. I actually heard really funny the other day. One of my friends was wearing a Tracksmith shirt and her daughter said, "Mom, weren't you wearing that shirt yesterday?" And I loved it because she said, "Yeah, I was, but it's still fine. It's still good." And that's kind of the best testimonial that they could come across. Her 10-year-old daughter just happened to be asking her that. And I love that I was there for that moment because it truly, the quality, the materials, the comfort, they do last better and not need a wash as often as other clothes. And they last. That's just what Tracksmith is all about, is getting quality products that last. So I've been loving hearing that you guys have been enjoying it. And if you haven't already taken advantage of their special offer, you can get 15% off as a Running for Real listener by going to tracksmith.com/Tina Muir. That's tracksmith.com/Tina Muir and use code Tina. You will get 15% off. You can also flip it and go to tinamuir.com/tracksmith. And I have my favorite items there on the website for you to go click through. You can also hear the story of how our love story, if you want to call it that, of how Tracksmith and I came together, which is pretty cool. So you can read about that there. Now, I just want to tell you one of my favorite things I am loving right now is the Horizon tank. And there's nothing like the soft kind of worn-in feeling of a cotton tank. But cotton and sweltering heat doesn't exactly go well together. Tech fabrics can offer lightweight wicking performance, but it can also feel stiff and kind of tacky. But this is made from a dry release fabric. The Horizon tank combines the comfort of cotton and the weightlessness, the quick dry properties of polyester. The result is you've got this sophisticated tank that's soft, wicking, durable, and whisper light. And again, I want to remind you that Tracksmith has created a special offer for Running for Real listeners that is 15% off your first order by going to tracksmith.com/Tina Muir using code Tina. Going to tracksmith.com/Tina Muir using code Tina. That will get you 15% off your first order. Go check it out. You will love them. I certainly do.
All right. Welcome back to Running for Real. I am your guest host, Sarah Crouch. And today I have with me one of the fastest masters marathoners in the world. Kate Landau just finished 14th place at the Olympic Trials Marathon in Atlanta. She boasts a 2:31 personal best from Boston, which those of you who have run it know it is not always the best course for a PR. So we fully expect to see some faster times out of her in the next couple years. But she is also, to my knowledge, the only person to compete in both the 1996 Olympic trials in Atlanta and then also the 2020 trials in Atlanta. So fast math, 24 years separating her Olympic trial runs in Atlanta, which is absolutely fascinating. And the story of what's happened in between is just incredible. So we're looking forward to getting into that today. Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun. Yeah. And Kate is also, fun fact, she is a physician's assistant. So the first thing I want to talk about now, obviously this podcast isn't going to air for another couple months, but right now we're in the middle of the coronavirus shutdown. And I just wanted to see how that was affecting you and your job and everything.
Yeah. So right now I am doing internal medicine in a skilled nursing facility. So kind of dealing with the highest risk group of patients out there. And a lot of our other providers are doing telemedicine now, but we need a provider that goes into the facility. So that's been me. So it hasn't impacted me as far as I'm still going to work regularly, 40 hours a week or whatever, still taking care of the patients in the same way. But as far as the patients at the facility goes, we're not letting visitors in anymore. Obviously, hand washing is, way up there. I mean, we're supposed to do that anyway, but it's definitely more regimented. We have to take our temperatures when we go into the facility. And luckily, we haven't had any cases. I think the facility that I'm at is doing a very good job of screening people and really got right on it and cut down on the visitation right away. The residents are not getting as much interaction with each other. So that's kind of difficult for them. But at the same time, I think they all understand, like, everybody's in this together. It's kind of like how I think it is for us. It's a struggle and it's not fun, but we're all in this together. We're all experiencing the same thing. So it feels to me a little bit easier. Yeah. Not always. Sometimes it's still hard, frustrating, but the fact that you're not the only one going through this, I think, is comforting. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that applies to running as well, because correct me if I'm wrong, but you had planned to double back from the trials and run Boston. Is that right? Yeah. So Boston was my goal race, really. I didn't really taper for the trials, kind of took a few days easier beforehand, but Boston was going to be the one that I was really going to focus on getting a good time and hopefully getting a PR. I really went into the trials just looking at it as a hard long run. And that's how I treated it. And I'm glad I finished it, though. I know there's many reasons for not finishing it. But I'm glad I finished it because I didn't end up having Boston as a backup. So and I didn't know that when I was contemplating quitting. Yeah.
And when your hard long run is a 2:34 marathon, I guess it's not the worst day in the world. And I think there was once a time, several years back that would have seemed nearly impossible. And really your story is so unique, and the journey is just unlike any I've ever heard. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk about it kind of in 5-year chunks, starting with how you started in the beginning, because I heard this wild story that actually like an umpire at a softball game told you should be a runner. Is that right?
Yeah. So that's when I was about 10. So before that, I was already like very competitive. Sorry, there's a dog.
That's okay.
Very competitive and racing the boys around the school and around the fields at gym class and beating everybody pretty much. And then when I was 10 and in Little League softball, the track coach was actually an umpire, and he saw me running the bases, and he kind of recruited me to get on the Junior Olympic kind of training plan in 6th grade. So yeah, that's where it started.
You know, it's funny. I heard a podcast that you did where the host was just like Junior Olympics. And it's so funny because you were kind of blasé-faire about it. And I got to be honest, I did Junior Olympics too. And it didn't feel like that big of a deal, even though it sounds like a really big thing. But I mean, obviously to qualify for nationals at Junior Olympics, you have to be pretty darn good. So at what point did you sort of become that high school phenomenon? Because you went on to set a national 2-mile record in high school. So at what point did you become, the runner that you were in high school?
I think that was 7th grade. So in 7th grade, I started out junior varsity, and within a couple of weeks, we went through the physical testing, the whatever kind of physical testing it was, and then a maturity testing to see if I could be varsity in 7th grade. And initially, honestly, I failed the maturity test, and I had to get my wrist x-rayed to show that my bones were developed enough to run varsity in 7th grade.
Wow. I've never heard of anything like, what did the maturity test consist of? What was that?
I think it was a physical examination by a doctor, basically seeing how advanced my maturation in puberty and adolescence in that time of life was. I'm guessing, I don't quite remember, but I think it was. I appreciate the concept, but I don't think they're doing that anymore. But there was a physical, you have to, run test or whatever it was, and agility testing, and then there was this maturation testing. So it's just interesting that I failed that, and then we kind of got around it with an X-ray, and then I started running varsity, and then I was second in the state meet in 7th grade in Class C. And in New York State, there's 3 classes, so we're the small school class, but second, and a senior in high school beat me. So
wow.
And then first on the team, and kind of got in the newspapers and started getting quite a bit of local headlines at that age.
Yeah, for sure. I think it also, and one thing we have in common is we both had sisters who also competed. And you had a sister who, I think her name was Karen, is that right?
Yeah.
Her name's Karen?
Yeah.
Yeah, who was also, she went on to compete in the 2008 Olympic Trials Marathon. So quite good. Were the two of you competitive growing up?
Yeah. So not before I started running. We weren't really competitive. I kind of followed her lead a lot. So I followed her into running. She had already been running, and she was the top member of the team when I started. And then I kind of became the top runner of the team. And so there was a little bit of sibling rivalry at that point, and kind of continued on for some years. And then I ended up following her to Georgetown as well. And then,
I'm sure she loved that. Yeah.
I feel really bad now, but you can't go back. So, and I think we have a good relationship now. She's a great support and everything. So things have worked out, but there's been definitely some competitiveness between us through the years.
Yeah. I think only if you really have that sibling rivalry can you understand it, because I was in the opposite situation. I was the older sister in high school who was getting beat by the younger sister, and that was not super fun. So I feel for your sister. I do. That's not awesome. Yeah.
Especially when newspapers write articles about how this younger Landau was beating the older Landau, and it's just, that was not good. So.
Yeah, for sure. Oh man. And I know it's that's obviously it's a really sensitive time, high school. And I do want to get into talking about, I know you have a very long and complicated relationship with food. So I was kind of curious, when do you remember, when's the first time that you can remember disordered eating becoming a part of your life?
So there was a girl in New York State. I don't remember her name, but she was probably a sophomore at the time when I was in 8th grade, and she had been a phenom, a couple years earlier. And then when she started to go through her adolescent growth spurt, she slowed down and she wasn't achieving those times or winning the races anymore. And that really stuck with me. And that was where I told myself, I am going to keep myself small. Like I had success in 7th grade at 80 pounds. I'm going to stay 80 pounds. And so I ate this for lunch when I was in 7th grade. I'm going to keep that exact lunch and exact, regimen because I don't want to lose what I've had, the success that I've had. So that's what I remember. And then I had a lot of success in 8th grade, won the state federation, which is all schools. And then I started to kind of mature a little bit in 9th grade. And then that's when I decided I'm losing weight. So I dropped about 10 pounds at that point, which was a significant proportion of my body weight. And that's really when just the eating disorder cycle started.
Mm-hmm. Can you kind of describe, for those who have never dealt with disordered eating, what is that like for you? Sitting down to a meal, what kind of thoughts go through your head? Is there guilt? Is there, just the emotions that come with every time you lift a bite of food to your mouth? What was that like?
Yeah. So I remember initially it started out cutting out solid foods a lot. And I started to just drink a lot of juices. I was getting a lot of, calories to juices. I was young. I was, 8th, 9th grade. So I didn't really understand nutrition or calories that well. And then I remember just proportions were really small and hiding how much I wouldn't eat from my mom in the morning, as far as eating 2 bites of cereal. It was very regimented. I would calculate, I ran 8 miles so I can have 800 calories, or I would get on the scale all the time. I think, I don't know at what age my family had a scale in the bathroom, but I remember having the scale and I would, be weighing myself constantly and never wanted to see that weight go up. And then it started to go down and that was addicting. And I definitely wasn't an anorexic that was, 200 calories a day or 400 calories a day or whatever. But I was extremely restrictive and there was a lot of secrecy going on, a lot of shame. And I lost all my friends at that point too, because it was just very isolating. And that's what the type of disease it is. I would wake up at, 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, do homework, because I was also very, motivated in school to be valedictorian and have the highest grade point average of the entire school. And I, just very competitive in that way. And then I would go to school and in study hall, I would do my homework so I wouldn't have that much to do after and study. So I have the best grades, go to practice, go home, eat a little bit, go to bed at 8 o'clock and scream at my family if they made any noise or laughed or talked or anything to wake me up, because I had to get my sleep for running. So it was just, it's definitely a different lifestyle for a young teenager.
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned over the years, I really do think that there's 2 kinds of elite runners. There's the ones who channel all of their competitiveness into one thing, into running, and in the rest of their life, they could kind of care less. And then there's athletes like you who are uber competitive in everything they do. It sounds like academically, nutritionally, even at the detriment of, you had to know, if the fact that you were hiding it, you had to know that at some point it wasn't good for you. And I can't imagine you got a period at all during that time. Did you?
No, I didn't. So I actually went to a doctor when I was about 17. And that was after I had started going through eating disorder treatment, but not really going through treatment, just going through the steps. And I went on birth control at that point in order to initiate my period. So never got it naturally.
Yeah. I mean, was there a point where your family became, did anyone ever really sit down and said, hey, Kate, this is a problem, we need to fix this? Or was it kind of something that was, hidden under the rug?
It was a battle for years, even before we really addressed it. We would fight about it and my parents would, try to push me to eat, but it would always come back to, or the way I remember it anyway, is always coming back to, I was having so much success that it couldn't have been that big of a deal. And I think they knew it was a big deal and they wanted it to be different, but they just didn't know how. And I was very manipulative, very secretive, very bratty. I would throw fits and, and scream and say terrible things. And I was pretty miserable. And then once my body started to fail me going into 11th grade, then I finally agreed to go get some treatment. kind of, cheated my way through the treatment enough to get running again. And so that's when we started going to see physicians a little bit more. But there was a time actually in 9th grade where I had a little bit of anemia, and they called it mono, but I think it was really related to eating and nutrition. And I went through a bunch of testing and stuff too. So my parents were aware. It was just that how could this girl be having so much success and be ill? And there was just not a lot of knowledge about eating disorders back then. Nothing like there is.
Right. Was this something that your sister dealt with as well? Do you know, or was it something that the two of you never really talked about?
So she did years after, when she was actually in college for a short period of time. So not while I was going, well, yes, while I was going through it, but not while I was at my most critical time. But
yeah, makes sense. Yeah. At that most critical time, what was it like at your worst? Because I read somewhere that you were even counting like the calories in a stick of gum, or in like the communion juice and bread, which is like a teeny tiny little tic tac of bread. Yeah. So everything was calculated. I would chew a lot of gum, but I knew if a whole big pack was 10 calories per stick, if it was regular sugar gum, I calculated that, and it was wild. And I would pray to God to take it away from me. But I didn't know how. I just was so afraid of letting it go, and so afraid of, losing that control, and then losing running, and losing my body, and losing my identity, because my identity really did become wrapped up in the eating disorder at that point. So I would read books about it at times, and I would do kind of my own little research, and it would be scary, but I didn't know the way out, and I didn't want the way out. I wanted it, but I didn't want it. And I want it miraculously to just go away. And I still want it to be, God, take this away, but keep me fit and able to run, and, not ready to give up on everything. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it sounds like both your body and mind were taking a big toll. And talk me through the injuries that resulted from the anorexia.
Yeah. So first injury was after I had to gain some weight. So that was in 11th grade, and that was just Achilles tendonitis. I had to gain 10 pounds or so in order to run again. And I came back running pretty quickly, won the state meet, and then developed Achilles tendonitis. After that, I developed a pubic ramus stress fracture in the spring of 11th grade in high school. And that took about 2 years to heal, because I was cross training on it like crazy. And still, my nutrition was terrible. So I still got recruited to go to Georgetown, but I didn't run the entire first year and cross country season of my second year. I redshirted and took a 5th year basically at Georgetown.
Yeah. And still, despite all this, your college career was pretty fantastic in terms of how well you were able to perform and at the high level, because by the time you hit the Olympic trials, you were still in college. You were 19. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. 19.
So at that point, I think I had only had the pubic ramus stress fracture. After that, though, it just became a series of, both tibias, both fibulas, both femurs, metatarsals, sometimes several at once. So, I kept count at one point, and it was up to 25.
25 stress fractures.
Yeah, in about a 5-year period. So, diagnosed by bone scans. So it wasn't just like, I think I have a stress fracture. We got bone scans every single time, but oftentimes there was multiple stress fractures at the same time. When I was nationals after, I think, junior year at Georgetown, the sports medicine doctor said one of my tibial stress fractures was like the second worst he had ever seen. And I was on crutches, and it was just, it was just one after the other. So I would train for about 8 weeks and do, get in shape, do really well. And then have another stress fracture, usually at the end of the season around nationals. So just
was there any sort of denial in your mind of like, oh, well, this isn't due to the eating, I'm just injury prone, or were you fully aware that it was nutritional, the stress fractures that were happening?
I pretty much knew. I think that it was related to the eating disorder. I had bone density testing, and it showed that I had the bone density of a 65, 70-year-old woman. I definitely thought I was injury prone as well. I have pretty terrible form, and I always have. And
join the club, sister. Me too.
So I thought that could have been a reason. So there was definitely excuses. My coach, I feel bad saying this, but my coach thought maybe I was kind of in my head too. I'd always seem to get injured right at the championship part of the season. But it was really, looking back on it now, it was just a cycle of cross training really hard, getting cardiovascular fitness so I would get in shape pretty fast, running for 8 weeks, and my bones were just splintering under me. So so I ended up having I was a 5-time All-American at Georgetown despite all those injuries, but who knows what I could have done, so But,
I mean, still, that being said, it's very few, college students that are able to qualify for and compete at the Olympic trials. So when you went in 96, what was that like? Did you understand how big of a thing that was, or were you too young to fully grasp it?
Again, that had been kind of my sister's goal ahead of me, and she didn't get it in 1996 because she was injured. So I got that goal. But again, I think so much of my running was wrapped around the eating disorder, but also, just pushing myself. I always wanted to just push myself, see what I could do. It wasn't always about, success or winning or anything like that. And I was on a pretty big high after nationals in 1996, where I was second in the 10,000 and sixth in the 5,000. And so the Olympic trials, I didn't rest before that. And I don't remember a whole lot about it, quite honestly. It was I was just on such a high from nationals, and sorry, my dog, trying to keep sanity in the COVID-19 period.
That's okay. We do what we can. It's funny. It seems like nationals was almost more of that was the bigger thing for you at the time. And who would have thought that 24 years later, you'd be back in the same city competing at the trials again? That's just crazy. I do think that during that time, it seems like, even though you did seem like you were being relatively honest with yourself, with the world, you were not. And I happen to know of the New York Times and Good Morning America both had interactions with you where you maybe weren't totally honest about the eating disorder. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So in the spring before the Olympic trials, I think that was the New York Times article. And I think it was Mark Bloom, maybe, he interviewed me. And I was, I'd gained enough weight that I was healthier than I was in high school, but I was still completely encompassed by this eating disorder. But I think I was pretending to myself in a little bit of denial. I thought I was better, at least, but I didn't really ever think that I would be totally recovered. So I think that was as better as I thought I could be. And then, I was interviewed on Good Morning America just before the trials, but it aired the day of the trials. And that was about my recovery from my eating disorder as well, and how I, had been this high school phenom and struggled with eating disorder and injuries and came back to run in the 1996 trials. And I remember I was just so not into the fame and the success side that I didn't even watch that Good Morning America.
Really?
Interview. I don't think I've ever seen it, quite honestly. I think my parents had it on VCR, on video, but I don't think I've ever seen it. And I think they probably threw it away because it was pretty, after all that happened the next 15 years, I don't think that was a very good memory for them.
Yeah. I mean, let's go ahead and talk about that, get into what happened for the rest of college and then right after.
Yeah. So college, again, it was just a roller coaster of injuries, a little bit of success, but usually that success was tampered by running on a stress fracture at nationals. So I would never quite run as well as my coach expected or my team expected, or one nationals at cross country, I couldn't run, or, I think the same thing happened in track. So it was just a total roller coaster. And then fifth year at Georgetown, I made it to nationals, but I was running on a stress fracture and I was lapped, and in the 10,000, I think it was in Boise, Idaho, and it was demoralizing. I just basically was like, I'm throwing away my track shoes and my running shoes, and I'm moving away. I'm moving out of Washington, D.C. I'm going to get a fresh start on the West Coast. So that's when I decided to move to California, and I really wasn't fully giving up running. There was still this hope that I could run again, but I would try to run a day or two and then something would hurt terribly and never really got to run again. So I got involved in cycling. But that's, I had kind of debated about joining the Reebok Enclave, which was Georgetown's professional team at that time, and going to Georgetown Medical School. But again, because of how terrible that last season was, I just dropped those dreams and decided to take a year off from school and move to California.
So living on the other side of the country like that, just completely uprooting your life. And then all of a sudden, for the first time in years, you're not even a runner. What was that like from day to day, you know, kind of living and sort of settling into this new life of yours? Like, did you deal with any sort of like depression related to that or anything like that?
Definitely on and off throughout the years. I mean, I found cycling pretty early on when I moved to California, and that became my new like addiction. I always missed running, and always I had friends that were cyclists and they couldn't understand how I was so like dissatisfied with cycling and my success in cycling or whatever. They didn't understand that side of me or what running was to me or that the success that I had in running. Definitely I dealt with lots of depression, but that was my norm from pretty early on in life was, you know, bouts of depression and highs and lows. But yeah, there was a piece of me that was missing for certain during that period of time. But again, I always found another kind of addiction to grab onto.
Yeah. What about your life outside of running, like in terms of your career goals and then also relationships and things like that? Was everything sort of normal?
Oh man, I don't think normal. I don't think no, I would not say normal. I would say because of my eating disorder, relationships were never normal. You know, it's such an isolating disease that I definitely had a friend or two that could understand that part of me and kind of see beyond it. But I didn't have any, you know, I didn't really date at all. And professionally, I could kind of separate that. So I was still I did well in PA school and, you know, I got a job right out of PA school and I did very well in that. You know, I'm a high achiever, so I'm not going to just do something half-ass. So, you know, I definitely, and I have a lot of energy. So things were okay professionally, not okay socially. But I had a friend or two, you know, in there to keep things so I wasn't completely isolated. But so from 22 to 34, that's when I was out in California doing PA school, being a PA, cycling, going to the gym, you know, exercising 2 to 5 or 6 hours a day, depending on, you know, if I was, most days were probably about 3 to 4 hours a day of exercise, going on the Stairmaster for an hour to an hour and a half in the morning and then cycling for a couple hours.
Still kind of fueled by, okay, this is the amount of exercise I've done, so this is the amount of calories I consume. Was it still that sort of mindset, even though like racing wasn't really a thing?
Yes, it was. And also I think it was like I was caught up in the doubles. Like I had done doubles in college as far as like I'd cross-trained in the morning and then run in the afternoon. And I didn't give that up for years. You know, I just like, it feels good to exercise as soon as you get up. And then I needed that in the afternoon and after work. So I that was part of it, but it was also just like, I got to do more than anybody else, you know, and there was nobody really to compare to. But I was just like, if there's anybody out there that's doing more than me, then I'm not doing enough. So and again, that became my identity, was this person who just exercised like crazy and ate like barely anything. And that's how people knew me. I felt if I ate a normal meal, people would notice. So I just didn't. And I didn't eat in front of people. And if I did, it was, you know, minimal.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And yet the self-awareness is so poignant when you hear that you wrote during this time a thesis on exercise addiction and its relationship to chemicals in the brain. Like what kind of things were you studying? And tell us about that thesis. I'm pretty fascinated by that, actually.
Yeah, so that was my 5th year at Georgetown, and it was the relationship between eating disorders, depression, alcoholism, and exercise addiction, and how they are associated with abnormalities in serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. And they're all related. So I guess that's the summary of the thesis. Yes, they are all related. And there's a high proportion of people with eating disorders who have alcoholism in their families. And depression is obviously there too. And the interesting part, that one of the interesting things that I learned was that in some ways, starving yourself increases some of the serotonin eventually, and gives you this high. And so that's one way that it is associated. It's just another way to increase your neurotransmitters that are related to mood. And so that was interesting to me because I definitely experienced that.
Yeah. In the light of all of that research, how did that self-reflect on you? Did it make you want to change at all? Or were you just like, oh, I guess this is more normal because there's other people like me and this makes sense? Like, how did it kind of reflect on your own behavior at the time?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about because it was kind of admitting that this is a problem for me, but still, like not publicly admitting, but anybody who knew about what I was writing my thesis on and the professor who read it, it was pretty obvious this is me, this is me talking about me. But at the same time, again, I knew it, but I wasn't ready to change it. And I was fearful of changing it. So it kind of was just like, let's keep on doing what I'm doing because I don't know how to get out of this hole. And I didn't believe that anybody could help me out of it either. Like I didn't believe that therapy was going to help. And I was just completely afraid of my body ballooning up because I would lose control. And quite honestly, and being morbidly obese because I had no control. And because I've always been all or nothing. Yeah. So it's either I, have all the control, and obviously when you have an eating disorder, you don't have control, but you think you do. You have all the control or you have no control. And that's kind of how I looked at it. Like I'm either going to be restricting or overeating. So
yeah, which is really interesting because how we talked about in the beginning is that you're kind of that person who does everything in your life. Like you said, you don't have past anything. So it's like you went all the way with this, even though, I think we both know you would never be morbidly obese. It's just the fear is there and that's enough to drive you away from it. But obviously at some point you were able to find that balance. And, during that 15 years away from running, I know there has to be a shifting point. I was wondering, does that have anything to do with your daughter, Grace? Because you gave birth. How old were you when Grace was born?
So I was almost 36, I think. So I actually went through eating disorder treatment right before I got pregnant. So honestly, it was just my body gave up again. And like it did in 11th grade in high school. I had been trying to compete as a cyclist and thinking about going pro as a cyclist. I had a friend who had been riding pro. And so I got training a bit harder. I hired a coach. And then all of a sudden my body just crashed and I couldn't ride 30 minutes anymore. And I had been riding like 5 hours, so my body just gave up and I was exhausted and I still wasn't getting my period, but I was 20 pounds heavier than I am now or more than that, because my eating was just crazy. Like the things I would eat, it's just like, I could tell you, but it's embarrassing.
I'd love to know. I'd love to know if you'll tell me.
Okay. So one of the weirdest concoctions that I did was non-dairy creamer, like the powder stuff mixed with milk. And that was like a dessert for me.
Wow. I'm picturing just a very sweet, like frothy, watered down milkshake.
Yes. It was just like I had that in my house and I didn't have anything else like sweet in my house. So that's what I would have for a treat.
I really think there is something to the strange eating, because I've talked to another woman who dealt with anorexia, and she told me that, she's like, one of the things she would eat all the time is, she's like, well, I ate a lot of raisins in water because I just imagined that they would, with the water, they'd become grapes again in my stomach and they'd fill me up. I think the way you think about food when you're going through a period of disordered eating is just so abnormal. But at the time, it doesn't seem that strange. It's just what you're in. You're a goldfish. You don't really know the water you're swimming in. So,
yeah. I have like 5 pieces of candy for breakfast.
Yeah.
Right after, I remember stopping at this like corner store and getting candy after every bike ride in the morning before work. It's just wild stuff now looking back,
Yeah. And it really, I think with the difference is that, okay, well, obviously with the biking that you were doing, it wasn't a high impact sport. So you weren't dealing with the stress fractures or things like that. So running broke you physically and then cycling broke you mentally. So maybe it took you getting to that place until you realized, that you actually had to commit to the treatment. So talk us through the treatment. What did that look like?
So once my body kind of just gave up, I Googled eating disorder specialists and therapists, psychotherapists, and because I knew that was my problem. I had known it all along. It was just basically saying it out loud to somebody else and reaching out for help. And I found someone and started to see her, and she was like, let's get you in right away. And so I started to see her, and she found me a medical doctor to kind of take care of the medical side and prescribe the antidepressants that I needed. And then I got started with a nutritionist, a registered dietitian who I had to see a couple times a week. And that was probably the hardest part for me. The psychotherapy, talking it out, was actually pretty easy and good. But going to the nutritionist and having the nutritionist tell me what I should actually be eating was just, I just couldn't quite comprehend eating that much. So, that was a battle, but, that was several months of my life when I was 34 in 2011, just dedicated to going to these appointments. And my work was wonderful. They let me, excuse me early so I could make it to the appointment. But I was still working through it. I was still going to work and still functioning, but barely, but I could still function at work. And initially, my therapist said, no exercise at all. You can walk 1 mile a day to work, but nothing else. And I think that was good for me. Everybody has their own, plan. And I think some people go to treatment places where they're allowed to exercise. But for me, it had to be, again, really had to be all or nothing. I think for me it was nothing. And then I had to go do the weigh-ins with my doctor. And again, my weight was high at that point. It wasn't like I was underweight at all. It was just my metabolism was so screwed up.
Your body was in survival mode, basically, right?
It was. Yeah, absolutely. It was holding on to everything that I put in it. And then, and then getting on Prozac was definitely helpful for me, because being in an eating disorder messes with your neurotransmitters hugely, and there was already underlying depression. So that was something that was likely needed for many years, but exacerbated by the state I was in. So I think it really was within like a month or two, things started to turn around. Initially, I was afraid to go outside in public and embarrassed. I was still going to work, but other than work, it was just like I was fearful of what people would think of me. Even though, again, my body wasn't changing that much, but again, it felt like it was because I wasn't exercising. Mm-hmm. And then, actually things just, I think the Prozac kicked in and the world turned brighter, and I adopted a dog, and I started going to dog parks and talk to people and hang out with kids at the dog park. I think was helpful for me at that point. And, and then I met Grace's father, kind of reverted into a teenager. Didn't think I could get pregnant because I had honestly just started menstruating. But I was like, it's barely anything. I'm not going to get pregnant. I'm not ovulating.
Famous last words. Oh, boy.
So I got pregnant with about 6 months after starting eating disorder treatment. And, I had been amenorrheic for my whole life. Even when my weight was quite high, I wasn't getting my period. because my eating was so, again, in starvation mode, in survival mode. I wasn't starving myself, but I was starving myself for, a large portion of the day, and then just binging at night is what I would do. But yeah, so I was in survival mode. I was still exercising a ton. My body was just like holding on to everything, not ready to reproduce when I was in the eating disorder. So going from never having a period until having it, a couple months after starting therapy and then getting pregnant is just a miracle.
Friends, you've probably heard me saying over the past few months that I am currently taking 3 months off from working while I enjoy time with my new baby. Now, please make sure I stick to this. If you see me doing things work online, that is time for you to get in touch with me, say, hey, what are you doing online? Now, I will let you know my assistant, Amber, is going to be taking over some things for me. Some things I have prepared ahead of time. But if you notice that it seems to be very real time, please let me know, because I promised myself I would take 3 months off and I need to be able to stick to that. Now, that being said, there is one thing that I am continuing to do during this time. Not these podcasts. These podcasts were recorded ahead of time. You've got these interviews to enjoy. There will not be a break in episodes during this time. And I'm really thankful for guest host Sarah Crouch for taking over some of those. But the one thing that I am going to be doing during this time is writing my email newsletters on a Monday. Now, there's over 7,000 of you already signed up for these emails. I know you love them. I love seeing your replies come in every week. And you can sign up at tinamuir.com/subscriber. That's tinamuir.com/subscriber. All it is kind of an update, something I'm thinking about for the week, something that I'm appreciating, and it really makes you think. I love that I have the ability to get into people's heads and really make a difference. And then at the bottom, I give some things I'm enjoying, some updates, just some things that you may have missed throughout the week that I would have shared. And it's just something that's very kind of friend to friend. It just feels like I'm emailing you just to kind of let you know my updates. And I would love for you to be a part of the 7,000 other runners who are on this list. You can go to tinamuir.com/subscriber. That's tinamuir.com/subscriber to sign up. And I will see you every Monday.
So going from never having a period until having it, a couple of months after starting therapy and then getting pregnant is just a miracle, because I did not think it was possible. Like, I was pretty convinced that I had effed up my reproductive system, I am so grateful that I had the chance to have a child.
Yeah, that must have been a shock, to say the least. And I can't help but wonder, because you talked about like being embarrassed to go out in public and you felt like your body was changing. Did pregnancy trigger any of that at all? Given that your body actually was changing kind of involuntarily, or were you able to pretty much embrace that as it happened?
Yes. So by the time I was pregnant, I was in a pretty healthy emotional space. I was kind of reverting to teenage years, as I said. But as far as my body went, I was comfortable. I was comfortable with just going on hikes as my exercise. And so that I really didn't feel conscientious about the changes in pregnancy, and I did embrace it. It was pretty scary going, getting pregnant outside of a marriage, outside of a stable relationship, quite honestly, as a physician assistant. But I don't know. I just, somehow I did embrace it, and people embraced me, and I got through pregnancy and loved it. And, so it was one of the best, healthiest feeling times of my life.
That's awesome. And it sounds like both mentally and physically, it happened at just the right time when you were, starting to both mentally and physically feel much, much better, and your body was recovering and your mind was recovering. And obviously, because we know that since you just took 14th at the Olympic trials, at some point you did come back to running. So what did that look like when you finally decided to come back?
Yeah. So before that, when after I had Grace, I decided that I wanted to move from California back to New York to be closer to my family. So I quit my job in California and moved to New York. And honestly, that period of time in New York, I reverted. I had some pretty significant eating issues of eating crazy things again and restricting. And so my milk supply was pretty low. But, Grace breastfed until she was almost 3.
Wow.
But she would just basically like nurse all night. So I wasn't sleeping. I eventually I developed pretty significant anxiety and had a pretty significant nervous breakdown. Not so much that I had to be, hospitalized or anything like that, but it was a scary time. So then I moved back to California because New York was just not working for me. And I was unemployed and I was on food stamps and staying with friends from church. And it was a really hard time. And then I applied to the job in Tacoma because my sister Karen lives in Washington, and I want to be near family, but I didn't want to be on the East Coast. So I got that job, moved to Washington, and that's when I started running again with Grace in the stroller.
I do have to ask, because I grew up in Washington and I know Tacoma. What was it like running there? Because so many places in Washington have like incredible trails and forests and beautiful places to run. Is Tacoma pretty much like that for running?
Yeah. So I was pushing a stroller, and I didn't like pushing a stroller on the trails. So there are some great trails here, but I was on the roads. And it's really hilly. Yeah. So like stroller running in Tacoma is not easy. So
it'll build up the arms as well as the legs. That's true.
Oh yeah. I miss having those stroller arms. Seriously. Like I don't have any arms anymore because I don't lift any weights and I don't push a stroller. So, but yeah, Tacoma's beautiful, and it was just so great to be outside again and moving my body again, because that year, that about a year in New York where I had really gone into severe depression and anxiety, I wasn't doing anything, no exercise at all, and felt pretty crappy. So it just felt great to get outside again. And I was just so grateful and appreciative of feeling, being able to run and not hurt. And it kind of reminded me of, there was one time at Georgetown where I remember skipping across campus after a stress fracture healed and just being like so overjoyed that I could skip and not hurt. And that's kind of the same thing that happened when I moved to Tacoma, except that it continued and I didn't get hurt again. Nothing hurt. And it was a great time for me to not be letting Grace nurse all day. She couldn't, she was out of my arms in the stroller. So before I started working, that's all she wanted to do. And so that was just a break. It was a good break.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And racing wasn't really a thought in your mind at that time. You were just running for running's sake.
Yeah, I didn't ever imagine that I would ever be able to run a half marathon or a marathon. But then my sister, again, who was in Redmond, an hour north of Tacoma, was doing a turkey trot. Wanted to do, she was training still pretty seriously at that point, and she wanted to do the turkey trot in Tacoma. And so I joined her and had a friend watch Grace, and I ran like 6:08 pace or something. And I was thrilled with that, like, holy cow, I can almost run 6-minute pace, because pushing the stroller, I had been running like 7:30 pace or 7 to 7:30 pace or something like that. I had no idea I could run close to 6-minute pace. So that's what kind of triggered the like, wow, I can have some fun with this. And I didn't care what place I came in. I don't even know what place I came in at that race. But then I just continued to train with the stroller, sometimes at work, at lunch or right after work, and did a half marathon that next winter and ran 125. And again, just very happy with everything that I had. It wasn't a matter of I didn't have to win anymore to give me satisfaction, and I didn't have to be the fastest anymore, Yeah.
It's kind of like, I can't remember that saying, but it's talking about like happiness is something that like, if you keep chasing it, you're never going to get it. But if you just sit still, it'll kind of come to you. And it sounds like running, and especially running fast, that's kind of how it worked for you, especially because just a few years later, you'd go on to run basically 5:45 pace for a marathon. So and that happened fairly rapidly. So walk us through your progression of moving back into marathoning and then realizing, oh my gosh, like I have a future still,
Yeah. So initially doing the half marathons, I never thought I would move up to a marathon. I definitely still had that idea in me that I was injury prone, and that I just would never be able to do that kind of mileage, because I knew my sister would do like 90 to 100 miles a week. And I was only doing 40 or 50 when I was doing half marathons. So I just didn't think that was possible. But then gradually just started to to run a little bit more. I ran like a 1:18 half marathon, and that was, set the course record here, whatever. It kept setting like local course records, but I was only doing like local races because of childcare issues. I didn't want to have to travel anywhere. So, and then I went on a 20-mile run with our Ruth Perkins, who
I know Ruth actually.
Oh yeah, cool. so I went on a 20-mile run with her like December in 2000, around Christmas time, 2015, and I was like, wow, that wasn't that bad, like I had never run 20 miles before. And that's when it kind of got in my head of running a marathon. And initially I wanted to set the marathon stroller, this record.
What is the record for a stroller?
Oh gosh, I knew back then.
I was gonna say it's probably in the 240s. That'd be my guess. It's probably pretty fast.
I think it was 252 back then.
Okay, gotcha.
But not positive. But I thought I could do it. Yeah. But it's super hilly around here, and the marathon that's in Tacoma is super hilly. And I was just like, yeah, it's not going to be fun to be pushing the stroller up these hills and trying to do anything. So found a babysitter for Grace for the marathon, and I ended up doing it without the stroller. I ran 2:43:45, and I think one guy beat me that day. I think so. I was like second overall, and it was like, I don't know. I was happy with it. I wasn't like overjoyed. And I knew the Olympic trial standard was around 2:45, but that wasn't within the window. So I would have to run it again. But I figured I could probably run it again because that was, my first one. I had definitely bonked and hit the wall. Hadn't taken any nutrition really. I tried to, but it was like I took noon, and noon is great for some people, but for me, it came up. Yeah. So then, I signed up for the Portland Marathon in October of 2016 when I had just turned 40, and I was like, I'm going to run under 240 when I'm 40. Mm-hmm. And I ran 2:38 there. So then, just kind of it was like, I love this marathon thing. This is awesome. Like, so I signed up for Boston after that. Yeah. And I ran 240 there. I was second in Masters, and I did, several marathons after that.
Chicago, I feel like it was 2018. It was a big breakout for you. Yeah. You ended up running 2:33 and finished quite high. I want to say 8th. Is that right?
Yeah. That's the first time I met you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's so funny. I remember looking at the results and being like, there is a 41-year-old right behind me. I was just like, what? Then I didn't know your whole story, but I think, had you been coached by James McCurdy at that point?
No. So I was coached by a local coach here in Tacoma at that point. James started coaching me before Boston of 2019. Moved to Florida. So, so Boston 2018, I had dropped out in the monsoon, and then came back 2 weeks later and ran 2:35 at Eugene. And then I came back in that next fall and ran the 2:33 at Chicago. So Chicago was a big race for me.
Yeah, for sure. And then following that up with another 2:31, and then obviously running a great race at the trials. And it does beg the question, how has your eating been like these past 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, I don't limit anything. My house is stocked. I eat everything. I never go to bed hungry. So I think it's as good as I could possibly be, other than I probably could hire a nutritionist to make me just learn to cook, or not. The nutritionist wouldn't help me cook, but there's things I could do better. Sometimes I eat too many processed foods, and there are things I could do better. But as far as restricting, there's no restrictions. I eat a ton of ice cream. I'm cutting out dairy now because I'm trying to figure out the source of my GI problems. But other than that,
I've been there, yeah.
Other than that, I don't really, weigh myself. I really do feel recovered. Yeah. So,
and I will say, I think, the results kind of speak for themselves, and just in the same way that back in high school, the fast times you were seeing prepubescently, those were the reward and the incentive. And right now it's these injury-free years of training. It's these fast races that are your incentive to tell you you're doing things right.
Exactly.
And it has been this big, massive bookended journey on both sides. And obviously as someone who competed at the trials in 96 and then at the trials in 2020, I'm wondering, how have you seen running in general change during that time, especially for women? I'm curious about that, but how has the running world changed for you in that time?
I guess it's less me focused now. It still is as far as for me, it's less me focused, but as far as for everything else, I mean, it's hard to say, honestly, Sarah, because, I didn't really, realize what was going on back in the day. Now it's so great to see so many women running and having success, and that's and speaking out, and gaining equality, gaining, not there yet, but gaining.
Yeah. Do you see that differently as a masters runner when you look at the girls who are running the trials who are like 20 to 25? Does any part of you feel disadvantaged, or do you actually feel advantaged having the experience you've had over the last couple of decades?
I think my advantage comes in, having a lot of struggles and getting through them, and knowing that there'll be another day, and knowing that this isn't everything in life. Running is not everything. So I think that's my advantage, really, is just having that kind of balance now. But I don't, I had many years of not running, so there's many years where I didn't have running experience. But I think life experience, I think that is an advantage, because running a marathon, especially, you're going to have highs and lows. And when you experience that in life and you can get through those lows, I think it's similar. You just got to keep pushing on.
Yeah. So. Man, Kate, it really does seem like you don't sweat the small stuff, which I can really appreciate. And I'm really glad that you went through what you went through in a time where frankly, social media wasn't a thing. And do you ever worry about Grace? Because Grace, obviously, how old is she now? 7?
She's 7, yeah.
7. So do you ever worry about her growing up in an age where, female teen suicide is at an all-time high because of this competition and body comparison on Instagram? Do you worry about that for her, about her going down a similar path?
Definitely, because I feel like that could be in her genetics. But I think I've learned in life, as far as the way that I cope with things, is that I don't worry about the future too much. I really try to stay in the present, and I really try to focus on, she is a happy, confident kid right now, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep it that way. But I really have learned for myself, I can't worry about that stuff, because if I do, it invades my life so much that I can't be the mom I want to be. And she will feel that more than anything. And that will influence her future too. So it's similar with what's going on right now with the coronavirus. I really don't worry that much. I'm just trying to take it day by day, and I can't think about the future. I've been through so much in my life, up and down, like more stuff than we've even talked about. And I've gotten through it. So I just have to, take what comes at me when it comes at me and push through.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's something in also letting kids learn their own lessons, which I'm sure she will. She's going to make mistakes. And, but I think she will learn a lot from your example, and, kind of wrapping things up. If you could go back and talk to Kate, who was in high school, just starting out on the journey of running and of the journey of disordered eating, what would you say to her now? And knowing all that you know now, would you give her any advice? Would you warn her? What would you do?
Yeah, I think I would say, what you do in middle school and high school does not create who you are for the rest of your life, or really influence it. It doesn't matter. And I think, back where everything started, me fearing the body changes that I was going to possibly go through, that's when then women gain their strength, or girls gain their strength. You get through that, you slow down a little bit, and you come out the other side even stronger. I think, those are kind of keys as far as my life goes. And I don't know though, I don't look back too much and regret anything either. As far as, again, I try to just stay in the present. Like, who knows what I could have done if I had been healthy, but you can't change that now. But I do want to at least be able to influence my daughter and other young teenage girls, to just take a little bit more relaxed attitude towards athletics. That scholarship is awesome, but you can get that in 11th and 12th grade, with your success then. Take it easy until then, seriously. Like, let your body go through the natural changes. Because the people who have success long-term are usually the people who let that happen and to have fun with sport.
Yeah. Amen to that. It really does feel back when you're in middle school and high school, like that's the whole world and you don't see past it. And even 20 years old seems so far away. But that is such great advice. And I know that most high school kids wouldn't just, it would go in one ear and out the other. So it's something you kind of have to learn along the way. And you are where you are right now. You're running the times you're running and you're the person who you are because of the journey you went through. And I think there is something in saying, okay, well, I wouldn't choose what I went through, but I also wouldn't change it, and you're in a very, very cool place with that. So I think that's a great note to round off on. But I do have, just to end things on a fun note, I have 4 really dumb questions I'm going to throw at you. Are you ready? Okay. So the first one does have to do with running. Would you rather have a permanent blister on your big toe that never healed, so every step would be a little painful, or would you only be able to race in sweatpants?
Race in sweatpants.
You're kidding. I would have chose the blister, I think.
I don't like running with pain.
Yeah.
Like, I really don't. Like, if anything hurts on me, I don't run. Like,
no, yeah.
I do not like pain.
I get that. The PTSD with all the injuries, even a blister,
exactly.
It's a lot. Okay. Yeah. I'd love to see how fast you could run a marathon in sweatpants as a side note. All right. Second question. Would you rather have a unibrow or a very hairy back?
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry.
A unibrow, because I probably have basically one. I don't really get waxed that often.
It's so funny. I think it says a lot about, because I asked my husband this and he was like, I'd totally rather have a hairy back. I think for those of us who just don't really care as much about the face we put forward, I was like, I'd rather have a unibrow. I was like, unibrows are coming back.
Yeah, totally. Hairy back. Yeah.
Oh man. All right. Next question. Would you rather only be able to whisper or only be able to shout?
Oh man, only be able to whisper.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the lesser of two evils. It wouldn't be great, but it's better than, shouting all the time.
Yeah.
All right. And then this last one is very difficult. Would you rather jump out of a car going 50 miles an hour or go over Niagara Falls in a barrel?
Oh my gosh.
You could maybe kind of survive either. So pick your poison, I guess.
I've seen a person who jumped out off of a truck going 50 miles per hour and it was not pretty. So I would do the barrel, I guess.
I wish we had another hour just so I could ask you about that story. That's so crazy. And I think I agree because I definitely know people have survived that. And I also feel like if you're going to die, it should probably be doing something cool like going over Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
So,
and that could actually kind of feel cool as protecting the barrel. I like that sensation, like the roller coaster drop kind of sensation.
Yeah. Oh man, we'll just enjoy it while it lasts. Oh, well, Kate, thank you so much. I think this was a really insightful conversation. And I really do hope that, maybe someone who's listening to this right now is halfway through the journey that you went on. And this will give them some hope or maybe convince them to take that extra step and get help. So thank you for being so honest. We really appreciate it. And I know all of us are very excited to see what happens next for you. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Sarah. It was my pleasure.
My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast, or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better. It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. What a powerful story. Kate is really a good example for those so many people who have reached out to me over the years saying, especially when people in high school reach out to me and say, it's my senior year. Will I ever be able to run again? If I back off or if I stop running, if I gain this weight, will I ever run fast again? I think Kate has proven that yes, not only can you run fast, but you can crush it afterwards. Even after a massive long break like that, things came back together for her and she was able to find joy. She was able to find a sense of peace within her body and within her life. And I think that's a lesson we can all learn from, even if that's not your specific story. I want to thank Sarah for recording that episode. What another great job she did with the interview there. And I appreciate her questions and just the time she put in to do the research there. So I think everyone, if you have a moment, go send Sarah a message or go follow her on social media and thank her for all that she's done, because I really appreciated the fact that she has covered these episodes for me while I am away. Now, speaking of that, next week, I actually do not know who my guest is. As I am recording this outro, I have not set up the next guest. And that is because it is now, well, as you are listening to this, almost August. And I would hope I would have my feet back under me by then. So it will be a mystery guest, but hopefully someone that you will enjoy looking forward to, or you will enjoy listening to, I should say. I will be looking forward to recording some more episodes at that time. But for now, you can go find me on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. You can subscribe to this podcast. You can share this podcast episode. And my friends, be kind to yourself, be kind to one another, and be kind to our world. I'll see you next Friday.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.